Hello, everyone. Welcome to another audio podcast on this series, the fifth series, series 5, around the Ztormtronix case review. And this is the scientist. And today we're going to talk. I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about a little bit in relating to or regarding racism and response to racism, but in a bit of a sort of a dynamic way. This is an audio podcast on the LabZtorm on the call to action, racism and response, and this is another Storm Robotics production. So what I'm gonna do, I've been so what I'm gonna do here. I've been fortunate enough to gain some understanding from colleagues in the renal under the renal patient support group, or the RPSG, and as listeners would know, that the uh, in previous audios excuse me, audios and podcasts, there were a lots of sort of references made to in relating to the renal patient support group, or the RPSG, and how the organization has been looking to bridge areas of kidney care practice between sort of the areas of clinical nephrology, or nephrology practice, aspects of science and public health, amongst excuse me, amongst other areas and focuses. And so the RPSG has done and evidenced has been highlighted through lots of different through different sort of social media platforms as well. So anyway, today I'm going to talk a little bit about and share this actual response. And this I won't take the credit for this work, though. This is actually from colleagues who are in relate who who are sort of at the forefront with regard to the renal patient support group, or the RPSG, but have been kind enough to share this with me so that I can actually share this with you. So so this is the RPSG. It's basically a response, kind of a sort of a response to aspects relating to racism, and that comes from the American Society of Nephrology, and their statement against and their sort of initial statement against racism back in June 2020, and in relating to aspects of healthcare. And I would kind of as listeners would know, normally at the end of sort of a audio podcast, there's a list of references, or a list of sort of further reading that people could do to check out things in their own at their own leisure and at their own time. So one thing that listeners can do, and I'll say this like from the beginning, or the get-go, and that is to say that feel free to check out the American Society of Nephrology, and if you put in the statement against racism, for example, in your search engine, and the American Society of Nephrology, hopefully it will come up in relating to that. But I'm going to read directly the context that has been shared with me, and hopefully there's points of points of reflection, for points of sort of contemplation, and ultimately, hopefully, everyone can gain a sense of understanding with from this. So in May 2021, the Renal Patient Support Group, or the RPSG, highlights reflective practice and professionalism in excuse me, in following response to a statement from the American Society of Nephrology, or ASN, from June 2020 on racism in healthcare. And there's a link, as I've said, and your listeners are welcome to check it out. Now, before I carry on, I am going to say that um, uh, I've looked at the American Society of Nephrology statement against racism, um, um, uh, and it's not a big statement, generally speaking. But what I would say is that from an outside perspective, or just like an overview perspective, I would say that the statement, though from an organization that seems to be very much around kidney care practice as well, much like the RPSG, the Renal Patient Support Group. The statement that the American Society of Nephrology organization have made have actually been seems quite one-sided. I mean, for example, a lot of the stuff that a context relating to this is that where the statement is concerned, and against racism, it's in the remit where basically it seems, and listeners are welcome to kind of get their own perspectives, because everyone will have a different perspective. But basically, it looks like that the statement is in kind of more in favor in relating to the health professionals versus the patients, or and in that regard, where the health professionals, for example, feel that they might be more susceptible or high risk for committing suicide because of potential disparities in healthcare, and whereas where patient care is concerned, where they might be compromised, or they may feel compromised, but at the same time, because of the disparities in areas of healthcare, perhaps more generally, then the patient perspective hasn't really been sort of encapsulated in part of the statement. So I'm going to give a sort of an overview on this, but from a very kind of different perspective as well. So I'm going to carry on reading what has been shared with me. So again, Muslims, and it's going to come from a more of a not a hard focus on theology or anything like that, but more probably from a faith perspective, at least from aspects that in some of the stuff that the RPSG team have sort of focused on as well. It's going to come from a specific area of faith, but also healthcare integrated into aspects of reflection and professionalism. Excuse me, and professionalism in context of sort of looking at aspects around healthcare from sort of, I suppose, bottom up rather than top down. So in May 2020, in May 2021, the Renal Patient Support Group, or the RPSG, highlights reflective practice and professionalism in following a response to the statement from the American Society of Nephrology from June 2020. On racism in healthcare. Muslims across the globe. So Muslims are those who are from that faith who follow Islam, and in a from a definition perspective, Muslims means generally those who submit to the will of God, and in Arabic, the Arabic translation for God is Allah. So Muslims across the globe today have been celebrating the end of the fasting month. Now, in this context, the fasting month was a sort of June-July in 2021 when it sort of ended. So this statement was is from them basically, but I'm going to carry on reading. So Muslims across the globe today have been celebrating the end of the fasting month, and normally Muslims across the world will be spending time with family and friends, praying together, eating, and sharing stories and experiences surrounding the passing month. Owing to ongoing segregation and following the circumstances surrounding COVID-19, not all families and friends are able to spend and share time together. But there is a promise of hope, bi'ithnillah. Bi'ithnillah means by the permission of Allah. And relating the above, the fasting month and end of Ramadan is a serious time of reflection for Muslims, but also offers time for all to remember those who are constantly disenfranchised and going through challenging circumstances, including orphans, the elderly and alone, humankind fighting wars, inequality, inequity, poverty, famine, drought, broken homes, financially crippled, unsheltered mental health and anxiety complexities, and various other disparities across healthcare. Prominence is required so that target education and recommendations is where best practice between Muslims and non-Muslims tackling health inequalities is pinnacle to ensure that humankind globally are not forgotten and become unpeople. Unpeople in context refers to those who are disenfranchised, and there is an international effort toward peace and humanity. There should be no surprise that during the so-called pandemic, isolation and shielding, it is but just a glimpse of what those who are fighting and challenged go through every day. They are those who are challenged and constantly fighting to meet reckoning between living and dying. COVID-19, for those who strive for ilm in Arabic means knowledge, and have ability to connect with faith. The time in front is just a blinking reminder of what is, what can be, and what perhaps one day will come to disengage. It is a reminder that whilst people cannot contextualize unseen, there is beauty and not knowing. But this can only be appreciated and understood by believers. There are so many other areas of life that lockdown is also an established focus. Whether it is wanting to go to the groceries, go and have a coffee, or the day-to-day living and breathing, there have been many changes excuse me, many changes outside of normal living that have been diminished because of recompense and environment. There are a few further truths in this regard. Islam, of that faith, teaches that the world of this life is a prison for believers and relates to flame. This has never been truer, and to such an extent that even that the environment, our atmosphere, and how we live and breathe is either good for us or it encapsulates our our health. What mankind can learn from this is that, quite unfortunately, and perhaps with some gravitas, our world is dirty. So for Muslims, the protection is something called wudu. Wudu is ablution, which is you can relate. With ablution, it relates to in lay language, is actually relates to sanitization and cleansingness, which is washing before the 5 daily prayers. Wudu is about keeping clean and purified for both body and mind. It is why the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, stressed the importance of cleansing. It prevents ill health and disease, but also prevents microorganisms penetrating the immune system. Islam teaches Muslims and non-Muslims actually that life is temporary, and it was even reported that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, informed that mankind is to live on this earth as if he or she were a traveler. Traveling is a journey and also temporary. It is also ironic but completely beautiful, because right now, or at least when this was written, so it seems no one was or is technically able to travel. But this too is an important lesson. It is as if Allah, God, is prompting humankind to be more in union with each other and fix your condition, and then you can do more elsewhere. COVID-19 or isolation and so-called shielding are all testing across several areas of faith and the natural world. Muslims and non-Muslims should use these um, uh, days and nights as times to connect faith. Faith is both fabric and pinnacle. When Ramadan arrives, it is a dear friend that is welcomed with open arms. It is a friend that brings warmth and encourages good. When Ramadan leaves, it is almost soul crushing because it is a friend you never want to leave. Every Muslim on every Muslim on the planet, whether every Muslim on the planet, whether you know about what they stand for or not, they are those who enjoy everything that is compassion, as derived from the eminence of Islam, meaning Salaam, and Islam is all about peace. Wherever there is right, there is faith, and wherever there is faith, there is discipline and gateway to understanding challenges and hardships across different lands, time, and humankind. Muslims learn and reflect through Ramadan and thereafter continue to practice mercy, love, and tranquility. There is a cure for every ailment, and that is known by Muslims through their connection with the Holy Scripture, the Quran, revealed over 1400 years ago. This is important to appreciate because it also proves that scientists and medics, clinicians, they have answers, but they only have part answer. Medicine has treatment, but physicians only cure some of the wound or prompt replacement therapy for a short time. For those who are bewildered by Muslims and Islam, you will always find them welcoming, contributing, smiling, and heartfelt. No amount of modern day media coverage will ever depict the great Muslims have contributed. They have been kept suppressed. Faith and religion are the same for Muslims. Muslims enjoy all that is good and beautiful. Finally, and this is something that the RPSG team sort of highlighted toward the end of this, and they say finally that they would like to signpost the works of John Pilger, Professor John Pilger, Dr. Mark Curtis, and Dr. Tariq Ali, who write in areas surrounding war journalism, world history, and politics as excuse me, and politics as wider economy and societal focuses. They write for stage and screen. It would be advantageous to read and review those works, and also the works of Dr. Chris Arnade, who's a US sort of academic and researcher who has not long ago published works focusing on dignity, seeking respect in back row America. And there is if you search out Chris Arnade on YouTube, you can find some of his works on YouTube, and the RPSG team say that they would also like to recommend the works uh, Eaton or Gay Eaton, who's authored several books and publications relating to reflection around different aspects of the day to day, but ultimately focusing on Islam and how it is mainly all about color, and also all about encapsulating and encouraging unity between Muslims and non-Muslims, and ultimately the book publications by Gaitan have context relating to mercy, love, and tranquility, ultimately. And So those are the some of the recommendations, or those are some of the sort of further reading that those who are listening can check out in their own time. And That's all I wanted to read out, actually, and I thought it was kind of a bold response statement, based on what the American Society of Nephrology sort of highlighted. And so I'm going to leave it there. This will there will be, after this audio podcast, there will be two more, and then that will end this series. So I want to say thank you for listening. This has been an audio podcast on the LabZtorm on the call to action, racism and response. And so I wanted to say thank you for listening.